I hail from Webster City, Iowa. I am a 5'12", used to be 5'12", a 5'8" music teacher. And we're going to kick off this student voice conversation with stating that, disclaimer number one, this session is not a conversation, it will be boring. Okay, we are not that interesting. And no, you don't have to raise your hand. Okay, this needs to be a conversation. We're going to have a couple of different parts of this and maybe some breakouts here in just a few minutes. But I will hand off to Mandy.
Good morning. My name is Mandy Gamble and I'm the Technology Training Specialist for Heartland AEA, so I'm from the near and dear Des Moines. And during the session we have a couple of topics. They all circle around student voice. You see some educators in front of you and a wonderful group of students that have participated with us during our teaching practice over the last couple of years, and particularly in the last year where we have really put focus on bringing student voice to the classroom and using things like Twitter so that we can get student voice out there, because Twitter has given educators an excellent opportunity once a week, well really every day, to voice our opinions about education. And then we realized, we know what we want in education, but we are not the prime suspects and focus of education. It is our wonderful students. So we've started things like the Iowa StuChat on Twitter. We post that once a week. We have things like StuCamps that both Dave or Aaron over here can tell you about. And then we have Ian Kuhn, who will definitely grace you with a lot of information for the Iowa ISLI group and the RISE conference. So with all of that being given to you, we have lots of topics, but we really want this to be driven by what you want to know. You came here because you want to know about student voice or ways that you can contribute to the student voice, motion, group, everything about it. Or we can stay here and we can go through slides, and that will be very exciting. Yeah. So we initially thought that we would do breakout sessions because we have so many different topics. Like maybe you're really interested in Twitter, so you could join me and my friends from Sheraton Middle School and High School to talk about the Iowa StuChat, or you could join Aaron and talk about the Student Bill of Rights, or Aaron and Dane talk about StuCamps, which are epic and awesome. Or you can listen to Ian and become his friend and learn about the Iowa SLI group and be a part of that, and then the RISE conference that's coming up, correct? So I will open this up to you. Remember our first disclaimer, you contribute to the conversation. It will make this so much more fun and interesting, and you will walk away with so much more. So we can either do this as a large group, and you tell us what you want to know about, or we can break down to small groups. We obviously have plenty of room. Do we need to do a show of hands? Okay, raise your hand if you want to do small breakout groups. You're a very interesting and wonderful group of people. Okay, thank you. So then, large group, show of hands. Okay. Yes, it is. It's so interesting. Okay, so we will do large group, and that is absolutely fine. We have multiple topics, so listen carefully. We can have Ian come and speak and tell us about his group of people and his experiences with student voice, because he is a student at Waukee High School, student body president. Yeah. Aaron can speak about multiple topics. Ian and Dane could team up for StuCamps if you're really interested in StuCamps, or you can listen to and ask questions about using Twitter in the classroom for the Iowa StuChat weekly slow chat.
What was the Student Bill of Rights?
Great question. Aaron.
I would say before I explain the Bill of Rights, kind of the goal of this session is one to get these kids sharing about things, but more importantly, what I see with a lot of teachers, a lot of people hear student voice, they hear student agency, how do we get kids to enact on the power of their voice and things that they have. But a lot of educators and students don't know where to begin or where to get started. And so I think what has happened with students become like Ian and a lot of these educators working behind the scenes really hard to build the platform, is there are things already in place across the state that not a lot of people are aware of, and it's driven by students. And so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so as we talk about ISLI and the RISE conference and StuCamp and Student Bill of Rights, some of you are like, I have no idea what these things are. The beauty of them is today, what we want to do is inform you and make you realize that no, you don't have to start alone. There's already groups, hundreds of kids across the state that are doing things. I mean, I shouldn't say we, but ISLI organized a rally to the Capitol, and over several hundred kids speaking to the people in power that can make decisions. There are all these things happening, and what we want to do is inform you and get you and your students excited to join the movement, join the cause, and be more to help strengthen the voice of students and help give more students a platform in these things. A lot of people just don't know where to begin. And so I like to preface that a little bit. Just to let you know that these things are done. They're happening. There's a huge student voice conference happening in a month that Ian's going to talk about. You need to get your kids there because it is awesome. It is super kick butt, and it changes kids and their modes of thinking, and even educators. We do the StuCamp. It's like an ed camp, but completely different by kids. And it's even just as awesome as the rest. It kind of builds off that. There's the rally. We do a slow chat on Fridays on Twitter. Kids all across the state jump on Twitter and tweet all day long, which is what Manny's going to talk about. And so these things are already done for you. We just want you to come jump on board. And so that's kind of where we are, I guess, as we kind of preface into these things. Yes.
As we're talking about the reason for student voice, we always want to start with why. Okay, how do you do it? You know, that's fine. But why do we encourage student voices in our classroom? Okay, we came. I think Jack said this. I'm not sure. Jack Hauser. Those most affected by education are the ones least consulted. I mean, if you think about our consumer-driven lives, we have focus groups for toothpaste. Okay, we have people who spend an incredible amount of time deciding, how cars should be configured, right? But when it comes to education, we largely ignore our students. We may give them a list or a menu or something like that. Here, kids, would you like to do a PowerPoint or a Prezi? That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about how do we use our students to not only leverage their interest in what we're doing, but maybe even find out what they're passionate about. So that's really where we're coming from for the why of student voice. This is you, Isma.
Yes, so ISLI, we kind of fed off of them because they have 3 pieces to their organization, and Ian jump in at any time. But the first one was voice. And coming from the classroom, I always like to give my students their voice. What is it that they wanted to know? How did they want to learn it? What was our end result? I know as the teacher, it was my job to look at the curriculum, to look at the scope, and think, okay, big picture. But I know this stuff. So I wanted to give that voice to my students. And so last year, I was a part of the Sheraton Community School District. And after the one-to-one, the educators kind of joined together, and then we reached out to some students that we knew and talked about creating a Twitter chat, because we're all a part of the Sunday night Iowa Ed Chat. Anyone else participate in that? It is a phenomenal opportunity for educators to build on ideas from each other. Why would we not give that same opportunity to students? So we took an opportunity, we kind of took a chance, and we decided that on Fridays, we started at the end of the year, and we did it 3 weeks in a row, that we would simply let the kids get on Twitter, and we would help post questions. And really, as the educators, we just facilitated the conversation, and the students drove it home. And it was probably one of the most phenomenal things I've ever seen, to be quite frank with you, especially since we gave them the medium that they're most comfortable with. But as the educator that got to sit on the other side of the computer, there was another piece of that conversation. So I'm going to, so I'm actually going to ask my Sheraton students to come up, and I want them to actually tell you about that opportunity to share their voice and what they think was the most powerful piece of that. So tell me your jet lag. So these are 8th and 9th graders at Sheraton Middle School and High School last year. They joined my tech squad. That's how I got to know them, because I was a K-12 instructional tech coach. So when I met with them once a week, it was always so much fun, because we just did some really nerdy stuff. And then I was like, hey, how do you guys feel about Twitter? And they weren't really on Twitter, so it was quite the experience to become tweeters. And learning how to use it, because one of the first issues that I got from the school district was, no, they can't be on Twitter. Twitter is bad. And they proved the administration wrong, because they used it in the most epic way. So I'm going to ask you guys a couple questions. You guys just float the conversation, okay? So when we started our very first Iowa Stu Chat, what was your initial reaction to it? Not everyone wants.
Okay, I kind of thought, the first time I heard about this, I was like, Oh God, social media. Nah, I'm not real big into that. I just thought it would kind of be done. But after we did it and started getting into it, I thought, hey, this is kind of fun. And I would totally be willing to do it again. But we haven't really got much of a chance to do that this year because we don't have a tech club at our high school yet. We're wanting to start it.
Do you remember?
Well, until you mentioned it, I hadn't really thought about the using Twitter to in the classroom to chat. So that was something new to me.
Do you remember the first question that we asked you, the first topic that we had?
It was something about education.
It was something about education. We asked all the students, the topic was, how do you learn best? What is your learning style? And I will tell you from the teacher's perspective that one of my big takeaways was one of the students, he's not here, but he looked at me and he said, Mrs. Campbell, no one's ever asked me that before. And that was a very powerful statement because as we are teaching them, we're not gearing always to their best learning styles or what they're interested in. What else did we take away from the Iowa Stu chat?
I already talked.
I guess I'll jump in and say that what ISLI chat showed, at least my school and people, some of my friends are a little pushed more than others to get involved with this just because of what I do professionally. So if they follow me on Twitter, they obviously get all the ISLI chat and the student voice stuff just without doing that, and they feel bad for unfollowing me, so they just get involved. So what the biggest thing that they took away is that student voice goes beyond the student council in every school. That students can do more than plan homecoming once a year, and that is done. Like, there's no need for it to be the end all, just a student council planning a dance. That they can do so much more than that, and obviously know so much more than that if you just ask. That was our kind of walkie takeaway.
Awesome. Webster City, did you guys participate?
We had some participation because we don't have a group of folks like your tech club. We're actually starting an action team this year, the Webster City action team called Dubcat. I thought that was really cute. But so it only showed that we need a group to function in that way. That's kind of different from the service model of student council that actually is an action team. And so ISLI chat in our school really pushed us that direction. So we'll be doing that here in the next week or so.
I don't have students here, but if they were here, they would tell you our first headache was we have no cell phone policy in our middle school. So how in the world do you tweet during school day when you can't have your phone? So that ignited our first thing of student rights. And what are you going to do about that? And so they had to put together a plan and a proposal to the admin to figure out how can we tweet. And they worked out a thing that on Fridays during lunch, they would come down to my room, they'd be allowed to have their phones, and we would tweet just during lunch during the school day. That was just a small step. Our admins see the value in that. Yes, we still have a no cell phone ban policy, but they're open to new ideas and opportunities to get things out there through these 7th and 8th graders that put the plan in. And so they're like, well, it's not fair, we can't do this. So as opposed, they're waiting for me to do something. But it's like, what are you going to do about it? So we got into that. What's that look like? What comes with that responsibility? You're opening up kind of a can of worms because we had an open cell phone policy about 3 years ago, and it lasted 2 quarters, and then everything's been banned since. So they had to understand the history of why things were banned, and just working with the admin was a really powerful experience. So we have something similar like Dane, the Dubcat, we're called Iowa High Five. So we have student council, we have all the regulated groups. Iowa High Five is just for kids that are really willing to act on their voice. And so they choose the topics. The Iowa Stu Chat is one of those avenues for them, and they work on making change. And so it is different than our student council and all the other clubs that go on after school.
And it's been a really great experience, like I said, from the teacher side, because not only are we on Twitter and we're just making sure that things are running the way they're supposed to, but there's another conversation to this. So sitting in class, they are tweeting, and Ian would say something, and then Trey would retweet it, and then they would all start talking about it, and then I was involved in the conversation. And so it's where those conversations then lead to maybe some policy changes, or it's a highlight moment for your administration, because so many schools, this has been our biggest issue, is Twitter is blocked in a lot of schools. It is not educational. That is what they will tell you. And so when we can show these kind of things, because our very first Iowa StuChat, we had a reach of over 1 million users. That does not mean that 1 million people participated in the chat, but because of the people that were involved and because of those that they follow, that is how many people could have seen and at least followed what we were talking about. I'm going to ask you one last question, and then we're going to move on. If you could do anything different about Iowa StuChat or the Twitter chat, what would you do?
Well, I would talk to teachers before so that we could be more free about which classes we would be able to chat in, because some teachers are really more open to it and some teachers are not.
So I have a Google form to our teachers. Most of them were comfortable with it. Some weren't.
So we have to get it out there to them, correct? Ian, if you could do anything different at Waukee, would you have done anything different with Iowa StuChat?
I would have got more people involved, I guess, obviously, to make that conversation larger. But making sure that there's teachers that are seeing it and the kids that are talking about it, that they're on the same level playing field, and we're not pushing the teachers and the educators and admin to the side, because that's not going to work either. It's kind of like that would be a revolt, and we want to work together. So that's what I would do.
Excellent, thank you so much. Yes?
Just what are some other examples of conversations that you had on there, and for the kids, what was the most memorable topic that you guys discussed?
So we talked about what our roles, and that means educators, parents, administrators, students, what are our roles in education? That was our last conversation that we had. And then how do you learn? And then our very last conversation at the end of the school year was, what does this look like over the summer? Because that was an ongoing conversation. Do we keep the chat going through the summer? What works best for students? We really wanted that input, because some students don't have internet access at home. Do we have this on the weekend, like before Iowa Ed Chat? Those types of things. So that's kind of where we're at. We started this literally in May, and then we just picked it up the last 2 weeks to try to get it rolling again. Gentlemen, what were some of your most memorable moments from Iowa StuChat?
I think the first one that we did, how do you learn? I think that one was the most memorable for me, because it opened a lot of people's eyes to different ideas.
I'm pretty sure actually he went to the principal and asked for like financial records afterwards. But it opens those kind of doors. Yeah. Any other memorable moments? Unfortunately, I've had a split in my tech squad because they were all at the middle school and now they're at the high school. So they have a new instructional tech coach as well, so that makes a world of a difference as well. But trying to get them involved from a distance, because I work for the AEA, so I'm trying to reach out and get students involved and encouraging teachers to let go and let them do these kind of things, because I think we've seen the power in it in just a few short chats. And it's okay to use social media in the classroom. And it's okay for teachers to engage with them in these conversations too. I think it's definitely needed.
I think the other big thing from my perspective is that, like, being on Twitter for a while now and seeing younger students that their first tweet and their first account was used for something meaningful and important, and that actually got changed and you got financial records, was much better than a selfie at lunch or like at Culver's or whatever it was.
Yeah, we haven't got the financial records yet. I'm still trying.
It's an ongoing conversation. But I agree with Ian. We talk about digital citizenship and your digital tattoo or footprint. Talk about an epic way to start that adventure online, because they're doing something where they're engaging in their education and they're voicing their opinions about what they need in education versus taking a selfie and sending Snapchats, which I would agree with Carl, that's weird. So. Awesome.
Okay, so to the education piece of educating the teachers too. I'm also part of the Sheraton School District. I am now the instructional coach, not the tech instructional coach, but the regular instructional coach there, and have tried to work with at least the gentleman in my building to kind of get things up and rolling again. And just the education that they have been showing me, and then also just how are they going to get that out to the other staff members has been incredible to get that voice piece. That's why they're like, can we send out a Google survey to our staff and see how many of them feel comfortable with, yes, you can do that, you know, and those kinds of things, just so that we can get that data piece, and then we know where to go from there and educate our staff. So, and letting them do the education. I mean, on Friday, for the Iowa Stu Chat, I didn't even have a Twitter account set up through my school account. I didn't even know how to get a tweet deck going. I mean, they did all of that for me, you know, and showed me how to do it and whatever, and I was like, okay, you know, like I knew obviously the gist of Twitter, but had never really done it myself, so.
Thank you. Any more questions about Iowa Stu Chat? Okay, so we will move on to our agency piece of this. Lots more goodness for you.
This is where I get very fired up.
Okay. Yes, absolutely.
I haven't bought one of these yet, so I'm kind of fascinated by them.
To the right.
It's got a thing. Whoa. Okay. Anyway, so while we were doing all this, while we were working with ISLI, while we were seeing kids actually being consulted about education, and they like had smart stuff to say. Shocker. We realized that we needed to move past voice. Voice was good, but we needed to move through voice to agency. So what is transitions? This is great. Voice to agency. So my first question is, what's the difference between voice and agency? And this is where you get to talk. Usually when I present, this is where I sit down.
It takes the
You want to send the
conversation.
students out to talk with them?
Huh?
Let's send the kids out to talk with people.
Sounds great. Kids, go talk about agency.
1 minute, let's go.
Off you go.
This is too quiet.
No,
I love your voice, Dan, but
Voice on agency. Go talk to that guy. You go talk to Mr.
Alex?
Somebody go talk to Mr. Manson. He's over there.
You're not, you're scared. I think like agencies are more so.
That's your guy.
So first it's always, just actually. Agency makes things happen.
Well, some of them don't take it seriously, like they say, like,
You need voice
so what are some things you talk about? Okay, like some people aren't.
Well, Mr. Martin is just not starting that. He's talking about the Bobcat team. So we haven't really gotten actually something yet. So we thought really talk about Dubcat team and then I think we're gonna have pretty much all of those because we're gonna have a freshman. I know that there's sophomores around here, and then juniors and seniors and seniors.
How low?
I'm guessing all of those. But I'm not sure. He doesn't really tell us too much about it. We have a boxer thing for the whole entire team. So far, we'll have more. Freshman.
Put it together.
Yeah, she was my fifth grade teacher. Seems like it's been longer than a minute.
Technology.
If I create a whole bunch of people who can teach themselves.
First group nights are seniors this year.
Well, 15 more seconds, wrap up the conversation.
How many of you remember the general
But we weren't able to. Yeah. And because we did it really fun. And they were last year it was bigger.
All right, so bringing it back together.
And, but they led those conversations. I literally said I can text people. That's all they did. And they walked away with connections that they could block.
So my teacher instincts want me to tell Mrs. Gamble to be quiet and get over here because it's time to move on. But as the whole agency and voice thing goes on, I'm just gonna like chill. It's like ingrained in us, is it not? So what's the difference between agency and action? Hey, and let's try this again. How about voice and agency? Because action's the next thing. Anyway, let's talk about voice and agency first. This is the time in the service where you actually like say stuff.
Talking versus doing.
Talking versus doing. Somebody else adding to that?
Where you start to make decisions.
Where you start to make decisions. Okay, does that go on with the doing? I think.
The tipping point of change.
The tipping point.
Build up to a certain point with knowledge and education and knowing about what's going on before you tip over to the change moment.
Could we say that it shifts from education, something that's done to me, to learning, which is something that I do? I don't really like education that much. I went to school to get educated. Okay, I went to UNI and got a degree. I went to Western Illinois, got another degree. It was given to me. But I learned how to play the guitar. And I'm really passionate about that because I taught myself. And I see people, when they start talking about learning and focusing on learning, they use synonymously, I taught myself with learning. And I think that's the tipping point you're talking about. And that requires agency. Nobody taught me how to play the guitar, but I got the necessary resources and set out to do so. Can we give kids those skills where they can learn independently? Or do they just have to fill out a worksheet? This is a magical device. Hey, voice means unheard. I hear my 4-year-old and my 8-year-old. Every time I talk, I hear them. But I'm sorry, you're not going to have your 3rd bag of fruit snacks. Okay? No, you can't have 12 cookies. Okay, but agency, that's where we get to make some decisions. I'll pause for dramatic effect and picture taking.
I'm good.
You good? So, question again, are students allowed to make decisions in school? Oh, it's 8:28. You can have a minute to talk to your elbow partner about that. If you don't have an elbow partner, just talk loudly to the person. Okay, are students allowed to make decisions in school? And this is not, are we going to have, you know, pink and green balloons, or we're going to have orange and yellow balloons. Okay, this is, are they allowed to make decisions in school? What is design strategy?
They do just do pretty much anything with it.
I think the decision that we made on it, how we want it, not necessarily big changes.
I went to high school. I was like listening to but going, let's go see the Rapids. Okay, there you go. I was trying to figure out like raise up and
Go ahead and wrap up your conversations here.
All right, folks, what are your key takeaways? Are students allowed to make decisions in schools? Of course, the obligatory follow-up would be why, or why not.
Trey had a really interesting.
Trey, you are just a fountain of knowledge.
We are allowed to make decisions at school, not important ones though.
And are most of the decisions that you make, are they prescribed? You can make a decision out of
These short term.
I think I've actually uttered to students, I'm a librarian, so sometimes I'm sorry, the rules, you don't have a choice over some of the rules that we have in the library, like there's no backpack policy. So I have uttered the phrase, it was a few years ago, like, I'm sorry, you don't have any choice in education. I've uttered it, but I don't think that way. When I think about your learning, of course you do, but there are certain things, like, that was kind of an aha moment in my own head, like, wow, I've said that before. That's embarrassing.
I have said, because you have to do this because I'm the tallest person in the room.
Yeah.
That kind of falls off about second grade. I used to teach kindergarten, so it was like, cool, no problem. What other thoughts? Maybe from this side of the room.
We were kind of talking about how it's about the process of learning, and the content is still going to be there. You're still going to have to go through your curriculum and your materials. That's just kind of the reality, but it's how it's being taught rather than, necessarily getting rid of everything, but letting the students take the lead on it instead of the teacher just dictating everything.
And I think some of the reasons we don't allow kids to make decisions in school is because we have to cover the content. Okay, I think there's a certain amount that is true. You have to learn how to read. You have to learn how to do math. You have to learn these basic skills. But do we test kids over what they remember or how good of a learner they are? Kids, are you tested on how good of a learner you are? It's what you remember, because we have to cover the content or the world will implode.